From strange accidents to unexplained deaths, here are 7 examples of hypnosis gone wrong. Before we begin, be sure to subscribe to They Will Kill You. Hit the like button and request any topics you'd like to learn about in the comments section below. Number 7. Gerard Rosenblum. According to Gerard Rosenblum's mother, the 21-year-old postgraduate student had always been interested in hypnosis and fascinated by the idea of levitating himself. In early October 1952, Rosenblum's mother found him dead, hanging from a joist in the basement. Although his death was instantly considered a suicide about a month later, the case was brought before a coroner's jury. The Rosenblum family lawyer presented evidence which suggested his death had been accidental. The argument was made that he had experimented with self-hypnosis and tragically failed in his attempt at suspended animation. He'd basically hung himself by accident while trying to levitate under hypnosis. The case was solid enough that the jury agreed, and it was ultimately ruled that Rosenblum had died as the result of hypnotic research. Number 6. Sharon Taban. On a night out in September, Sharon Taban went to a hypnotism show at a pub in Leyland, Lancashire, England. The hypnotist, a man called Andrew Vincent, got her in a trance. He told her that upon waking up, she'd feel a 10,000-volt electric jolt in her seat. Taban awoke with a shock and then went home. On the way, she reportedly told a friend that she felt dizzy. The 24-year-old was in good health and had been drinking moderately that night. Yet hours later, she choked on her own vomit and died in bed. Her death was considered an accident, but some weren't convinced. Taban's mother blamed the hypnotist and said that her daughter was terrified of being electrocuted, which might have played a role in her death. Her lawyer argued that the hypnosis had somehow numbed her gag reflex, and that's why she choked to death. Taban's mother asked for a ban on public hypnotism shows, and although reportedly discussed by several high-ranking officials, a ban never took effect. Number 5. Ella Salomon. According to the Journal of the American Medical Association, the first person to die under hypnosis was a woman named Ella Salomon on September 17, 1894. She was a 23-year-old clairvoyant who lived in Upper Hungary, present-day Slovakia. One day, a man known only as Mr. Neukom visited Salomon at her uncle's home. Neukom, an amateur hypnotist, wanted to ask the young clairvoyant some questions regarding his brother's health. The doctors who'd been treating him didn't know if the blood he'd been spitting up was coming from his lungs or from his stomach. Neukom asked Salomon if she would agree to undergo hypnosis. The young woman consented, and Neukom hypnotized her in front of her parents and uncle and started to ask her questions about his brother. After Salomon gave a detailed description of the lungs, Neukom asked if his brother was going to die. Salomon then said, "Be prepared for the worst," before collapsing to the floor. Only minutes later, she was dead. The incident was partly attributed to the hypnotist's lack of experience, but it was also theorized that Salomon's brain couldn't handle the excitement of the trance-like state. Number 4. Jerome FERRERI. In 1948, Jerome FERRERI and his wife Betty had been married for several years, had a 4-year-old son together, and were living in the upscale Hancock Park neighborhood in Los Angeles. Their lives might have seemed idyllic from the outside, but on October 26th, the couple had already been fighting for days. That night, their argument reached a boiling point as Jerome brought a young woman to the home they shared. Betty flew into a rage and chased them away, swinging a pipe wrench. When Jerome returned, he reportedly started to viciously beat Betty. Her screams were heard by neighbor and local gangster Charles FAUCI and by the mansion's handyman, Alan Adron. FAUCI then gave the handyman a revolver and told him that Jerome was going to kill Betty. Adron found the couple fighting in the kitchen and shot Jerome twice. He would have unloaded a weapon, but it jammed, so he started hitting him with it. Then Betty took the revolver from Adron and attempted to fire it at her husband. When that didn't work, she took a meat cleaver and split his skull open with over 23 strikes. In the resulting trial, Betty and FAUCI were acquitted after they testified that Jerome was a violent man and a danger to those in the household. 2 psychiatrists argued in court that the power of suggestion had placed Adron into a trance prior to the shooting. The argument was made that Betty's screams, combined with FAUCI giving him the gun, induced a hypnotic state. The handyman was found to have been insane at the time of the shooting, but sane afterwards. which is why he was cleared of the charges and wasn't sent to a mental facility. Number 3. Bjorn Scho Nielsen. On March 29, 1951, an attempted bank robbery in Copenhagen tragically turned into a double homicide. 33-year-old Pali Winchman Hardrop walked into the building, pulled out a firearm and demanded money. The teller reportedly didn't comply, so Hardrop fired his weapon. He shot the teller, Kaj Muller, as well as the bank's manager, Hans Wisbom. They both died. After the police arrested Hardrop, he claimed he was innocent and told the officers that he'd been hypnotized by his cellmate, Bjorn Scho Nielsen. Over a period of 3 months, Nielsen had several sessions every week with Hardrop. Through hypnosis, he'd guided him through every step of the robbery. Hardrop was instructed by Nielsen to shoot the bank teller as well as the person after them if they didn't hand over the money. After examining the evidence and testimonies, the Danish justice system considered that certain aspects of the story checked out. There were reports of a previous robbery committed by Hardrop, after which he turned all the stolen money over to Nielsen. The latter was sentenced to life in prison for his role in the crime, while Hardrop was committed to a mental facility. Number 2. George Kenny. In 2011, George Kenny was a well-liked principal of Northport High in Sarasota County, Florida. Kenny had an interest in hypnotism and was known for helping students deal with test anxiety or athletes perform better through hypnosis. According to some families, the teenagers showed improvements in their respective fields of interest after sessions with Kenny. Nevertheless, school district officials told the principal to only hypnotize them as part of demonstrations during psychology classes. Despite the warning, Kenny continued to hypnotize students, often without their parents' permission. He'd held hypnotism sessions with over 70 teens as well as staff. Then, a string of mysterious deaths occurred in the spring of 2011, which brought Kenny's practices into question. Marcus Freeman was the 16-year-old quarterback of the football team. Kenny hypnotized him and taught himself hypnosis techniques so that he could focus better during games. In March, he drove his car off the road and later succumbed to the injuries sustained in the crash. According to Freeman's girlfriend, he had a strange look on his face right before he veered off. 16-year-old Wesley McKinney was a talented guitarist with hopes of attending the Juilliard School of Arts. On April 8, 2011, he was found hanging in a vacant home next to his house. Kenny admitted that he'd hypnotized him 3 times, including the day before he committed suicide. Kenny had also hypnotized 17-year-old Brittany Palumbo to help her with test anxiety. In April, her parents found her lifeless body hanging in her bedroom closet. The Florida School Board settled with the victim's family and paid each of them $200,000. Kenny was charged with 2 misdemeanors and the practice of hypnotism without a license. He served a year of probation after pleading no contest and gave up his teaching license. So far, there isn't a clear direct link between hypnosis and suicide. However, researchers have argued that unless it's properly done, it can trigger dormant mental health problems and as such may cause people to have bad reactions. Number 1. Marie Colombos. In 1938, a young pregnant woman named Marie Colombos was concerned about the pain of her traditional birth. The 23-year-old had heard of a man called Robert Gilbert, who'd helped a woman give birth painlessly by hypnotizing her, known as the Great Gilbert. He was in vaudeville for over 2 decades and his specialty was hypnotism. In June, Gilbert met Colombos at her home in Glendale, California for a practice session. What happened next isn't clear, but the authorities were eventually called to the house and found the woman dead on the couch. She had a faint smile on her face and rested with her arms folded over her chest. Gilbert was arrested but claimed he hadn't done anything to the expected mother. He stated that he just placed Colombos on the couch after she'd suddenly collapsed to the floor. At his trial, Gilbert maintained his innocence and that hypnotism wasn't dangerous. Colombos' autopsy revealed no physical indication of the reason for death. She was subsequently exhumed and a second autopsy was carried out, but an explanation still wasn't found. Even though he was initially found guilty, the lack of evidence ultimately led to Gilbert's conviction being overturned. Thanks for watching. Do you know other cases of hypnosis gone wrong? Tell us about them in the comments section below.